Hi, I'm Congressman Steve King, representing Iowa's 4th Congressional District. This is Facebook Live, and every once in a while I want to come to you and just talk about some of the things that are on my mind and let you know what's going on here in Washington, D.C. And so today, whatever day this is of the Trump presidency, we have seen a whole string of executive orders unfold. I would look back to Inauguration Day on that Friday, the 20th of January, and it's a seminal moment in our history. We've seen presidents elected and take the oath of office as President Trump did, who had made a string of promises for a year or more on the campaign trail. And I don't think we've ever seen a president keep so many of his campaign promises, at least so quickly, within the first days and the first couple of weeks of his administration. We've seen as the transition team was putting people together and advancing names to be appointed to the cabinet that all have to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And throughout this, we've also seen the vacancy in the Supreme Court brought about by I'll say the tragic loss of Justice Scalia, the most revered justice on the United States Supreme Court. For 30 years, his voice was heard, and he defended the Constitution and the rule of law. We miss him greatly, and yet we have to move on, and the appointment to that slot just took place recently. So as I recap the things that I've witnessed here in this city, a series of executive orders. On the very afternoon that Donald Trump took the oath of office, he shortened the length of the parade to only about a 90-minute parade so that he could be in the office signing executive orders and moving the country in the right direction. And there was a ceremony there as he signed executive orders, mostly to set up appointments to the cabinet and get the government moving that day. But it was interesting to watch as different people gathered around and he would sign an executive order and hand a pen out. He handed one to Nancy Pelosi that directed the Health and Human Services to do all they could within the law to roll Obamacare back. She handed that pen back over. She thought she should have a different one. That was kind of a humorous little moment, and I thought she handled herself actually pretty well on that. But I saw the professionalism, a little touch of levity, but I also see, and you can see it in the eyes of Vice President Mike Pence and hear it in his voice, the gravity of the things that are taking place, the awesome responsibility that we the people have bestowed upon President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, and then throughout that trust into the various members of the cabinet that are now nominated, and some of them are confirmed, at which point they're formally appointed to the cabinet. The Senate has been pushing back, some of the Democrats in the Senate, including Chuck Schumer, of course, leading that opposition. And we've seen tension in the streets in Washington, D.C. We saw anarchists come to the streets on Friday, the 20th of January, and the anarchists were burning trash in the middle of the street. They lit a limousine on fire. They broke the windows out of that limousine. There were small little riots in the street that were covered by more reporters than there were demonstrators. That was on Friday. And on Saturday, the streets filled up with the women's protest. It seemed like it was the Women Against Trump protest. And there were thousands, tens of thousands of them here wearing pink hats, many of which they had knitted themselves by some formula or plan that came over the internet for them. Some of them had their airline tickets bought to fly into Washington, D.C. and to other cities. Others rode buses for as long as 20 hours to get here. And I talked to a lot of them. I went into a McDonald's and to get a hamburger. It was full of ladies in pink that had a different political opinion. And so I listened to all of them as they lined up to tell me what they thought, and they eventually gave up and left to do other things. But that's the kind of dissent that's here in the streets. The women's protest, they were marching for women's rights, and in the end the question that they couldn't answer was, what rights do men have that women do not? I don't know what men might have as rights that women do not, and neither did they. So perhaps this demonstration was left over from Hillary's campaign, which was a campaign to women, because she wanted to be the first president of the United States that's female. And then the next weekend, as we get to weekend number 2 under the Trump presidency, we see the demonstrations out there that are demonstrating against the executive order that's a travel ban on people coming from 7 countries in the Middle East that have a record and a history of producing terrorists that are attacking free people. And those free people are often attacked in Europe. We don't want that to happen here. I want to make it clear that my position has long been that We cannot vet these potential terrorists with any degree of accuracy. When you bring people in that bring with them a religious belief that their path to salvation is in killing others, and in particular Christians and Jews, there seems to be a bonus for that in their minds. When you bring them into this country, their parents might be peaceful, and the second generation has a number of times risen up to commit mass murder against Americans. And so we need to be aware of the risk that's coming in, as Barack Obama was queued up to bring in hundreds of thousands of refugees from Syria, from Iraq, from other countries around, other countries in the Middle East. And President Trump's executive order shut that off. Now, it could have been deployed in a more careful fashion, in such a way that it didn't allow people, say with green cards, to board an airplane from any of those countries where travel was banned. That should have been a fairly simple thing to do. I don't think that they got ahead of that far enough, and around, they said 109 people were held up or inconvenienced by this, and others say maybe over 200. But out of 325,000 that traveled to the United States in those days, gives you an idea that it's a small part of all of this. And so that's some of the controversy. And as soon as there is a scent of any controversy in the air, then people are getting tweets and Facebook notices that say, go to John F. Kennedy Airport in New York and demonstrate. Make your own signs so it looks like this is a homemade demonstration. We've had congressional leaders that come in with bullhorns, and they have demonstrated in a number of these cities, including here in Washington, D.C. last night for the announcement of the the nomination to the Supreme Court. I received an invitation to come out to the White House to witness that nomination. And there were a group of us from the House. It was House leadership, and then the chairs and subcommittee chairs in the House Judiciary. I chair the Constitution Subcommittee. That's natural for me to be there to witness this, and I appreciate the invitation. Met with the Senate Judiciary Committee members that were also there, and Senate leadership. And one of the things that I was very grateful for, and standing in that dining room waiting for this program to start, was former Attorney General Ed Meese III arrived to witness this, and I had an opportunity to talk with him again last night. We've developed a friendship over the years, and to see Ed Meese in the White House, in the West Wing of the White House, in the dining room, ready to go in and hear President Trump announce who he is nominating for the next justice on the Supreme Court was really moving to me, because Ed Meese, as Attorney General under Ronald Reagan 36 years ago, was there in the center at the beginning of the era of the Reagan era. And now he's there 36 years later in the center of the beginning of the Trump era. And I hope and pray that the Trump era is as successful as the Reagan era was. And so that was the meaning of that to me. I sort of sat in the room, in the East Room, as the announcement was made by President Trump, and listened to the speech by Justice Gorsuch. And I noticed that Neil Gorsuch, as he was giving a relatively short speech, a little bit about his judicial philosophy, that his wife, Marie Louise, was standing off behind his left shoulder, and kind of in the middle of that speech he stopped, he looked over his shoulder, made significant eye contact with his wife, and that's what told me that they are a bonded couple, and that she supports him in every way, and he supports her in every way. He grew up in Colorado. I spoke with a number of his friends that he'd accumulated over the years, one that had gone as far back as grade school with him. Others were law school friends. Others were people that had practiced law with him. And of course, the circle was all lawyers there, very well-educated lawyers, a couple of them from the University of Iowa. And as I heard the narratives about the life of Neil Gorsuch, it comes down to this, that everything that you see on his record has also been reflected in his private life, that he's a stellar individual, an impeccable education, an impeccable record, and that he has stood and defended the Constitution and the rule of law with utter consistency in each of the decisions that he has written throughout the years as a judge. And the most compelling thing that I learned last night is not something that I've seen in the press, and that is that the White House counsel described the process that they went through to sort the 21 candidates on the list that they would draw from. that we were told that each of the candidates were interviewed. So they had 21 interviews, a minimum, but I'm confident it was 21. And each candidate, they asked them, if it's not you who would be the next justice on the Supreme Court, whom would you recommend to us to choose out of this list of 21? Who would you recommend? 20 of the 21 recommended Neil Gorsuch. That's just astonishing to think that they would have a unanimous opinion that he would be the top candidate. And so if I were the one conducting those interviews and if they had that unanimous support for him, it seems to me like it's very clear this is the best decision. Donald Trump has kept his word. He's nominated a strict constructionist, a justice within the mold of Justice Scalia. And as I spoke with Senator Mike Lee last night, who had been entertaining himself by reading Gorsuch's opinions, and he says he's a little bit nerdy about that, but I'm not sure. I'm going to read some of his opinions too. That he would be sitting there on the plane, smiling and laughing at the clarity and the touch of, I'll say, the touch of personality that emerges from Gorsuch's writings. That sounds like Justice Scalia to me. There'll never be another Justice Scalia, but I think we've got a really good candidate to begin to try to fill his shoes. So I will defend Justice Gorsuch, and I'm hopeful that there will be a quick confirmation in the United States Senate. This country is getting up and moving again under the Trump administration, and I'm delighted that I'm seeing executive order after executive order, many of them undoing the work that was done by Barack Obama and putting America back on its constitutional and free enterprise foundation, setting America back on the rails again. It is an exhilarating time here in Washington, D.C. Signing out now. Thanks for tuning in.